On Christmas Eve in 1993, my father shot my stepmother. He didn't kill her. He shot her in the stomach at point-blank range, dropping her onto the floor in writhing agony. Don't get me wrong, he had every intention to kill her, but just not right away. You see, my father shot every one of his victims in the stomach to incapacitate them before slowly, systematically, and ritually torturing and raping them to death before final live burial on the farm property. Shooting someone in the stomach causes tremendous pain. Often the victim will pass out temporarily and they can then be tied up or transported very easily during this time. She was no different. My invitation that day was an elaborate trap. My father intended to kill me that night, but instead my stepmother intervened to save me one too many times, and she was shot instead of me. What happened? This is where everything gets weird. My father, he came out of the spare bedroom wearing an ankle-length cape of tanned human skin with a fur collar and deer horns. He was completely nude, except for a loincloth, also made of the tanned human skin of his many victims. Under his arms, he wore double shoulder holsters with his beloved Glock 9mm under each arm, and a leather belt with his razor-sharp skinning knife at his waist. That's when everyone started showing up. Victor was a stickler for being on time, so everyone arrived at once. The first to arrive was Babyface Cop. He opened the door without knocking and walked in like it was his house. He was in full uniform 90 miles from his jurisdiction. "Why is your truck blocking the driveway? Nobody can get in," he said. "I didn't want him to escape." Victor motioned at me with his head. Gigi popped her head in. "Do you have the keys? We need to move your truck." Victor tossed her the keys. Behind her was Shem Steinberg's adopted blackish daughter with her freckles, heavily bleached skin, and red hair. Her eyes went wide when she saw I was free. "Why isn't he tied up or dead or something?" "We'll get to it. Don't worry," Victor said. "What happened to her?" "Her? I shot her. She was trying to help him." Victor shook his head in disgust. 6 more cops piled in through the door. 5 were in uniform. "You shot your wife?" Strong Cop raised his eyebrows. "She tried to save him," Victor explained. "But she's your wife." "That's not my wife," he said. "Are you sure you can do this to your son?" Female cop said. "That's not my son." "You have to take her to the hospital," I said. "She could die. What's the matter with you?" "Shut him up. Grab him," Victor ordered. 6 men grabbed me with their hands. All of these men were kids from my neighborhood growing up. 2 put their hands over my mouth. I bit them both. 3 knives were put to my throat. 2 guns were pressed into my sides. "Can we start now?" Uncle Leo was eager. He picked up the mini sledge and looked at my kneecaps, smiling like a devil. "Not yet. Let everyone get inside first. We don't want anyone to miss anything." Victor was completely in charge. No one moved without his say-so. "Why aren't you in uniform?" "I'm out of my jurisdiction," the Manassas cop said. "I told you to wear your uniform. Next time, wear your uniform." "Simple instructions," Victor ordered. There were 7 cops present from 3 states representing 5 counties. 5 were in their uniforms. 2 wore plain clothes. The cop from Prince George's County, Maryland, brought a date. It was the girl from my movie. She was the daughter of another Prince George's County police officer, so she was trustworthy. "Are you going to break his legs?" "I want to do it." Grossman, the movie mogul, pushed past Steinberg's daughter. "Can I shoot him?" Steinberg's daughter volunteered. "Of course. Of course you can shoot him. But shoot him in the stomach. We don't want to kill him yet." Victor smiled directly at me and made sure to make eye contact. Uncle Leo took a swing at my kneecap with the mini sledge. I moved my leg and the handle hit me and pinched his fingers. When he came up cursing, I aimed a perfect full-power headbutt to the bridge of his nose, almost knocking him out. "Shit. I almost cut his throat. Is he bleeding?" "Who's in the basement?" I saw all the cars. Did you kill him yet? The neighbor pushed his way through the crowd wearing his gun and knife. Welcome, welcome, Victor laughed. And so it began. After much discussion and shaming on my part, they decided not to kill my stepmom. And so by the end of the evening, they took her to the hospital in Morgantown, West Virginia, where she underwent multiple surgeries. Uncle Leo called me constantly to update me on her progress and to express his rage that this was all my fault that his mother had been shot. He repeatedly told me that he was going to kill me for this and that it was only a matter of time. A victim with a bullet wound to the stomach will die from bacterial meningitis, sepsis, or organ failure. The body will eventually shut down and the victim will die of toxic shock from powerful stomach acids and bile attacking the other organs, internal blood hemorrhaging, and all of this mixing together inside the stomach cavity. This is a horrible death. The police currently deny that there are any records of her at the Morgantown, West Virginia hospital. It's possible that they covered it up and provided only home health care and waited to see if she would die. All of their other victims were kept alive, many for very long periods, with even worse injuries and no official medical care. But this contradicts everything stated to me by the murderers themselves. When Diana eventually recovered, she was in the hospital for about a month. There were several discussions that my father was required to take her to the gynecologist at least once a year, or it could be considered abuse. I sincerely doubt that any competent physician could fail to notice the massive bullet wound in her stomach affecting her health constantly. One day, several months later, I received a call out of the blue. It was Diana, and she told me that she was being held hostage, starved, beaten, and raped at Uncle Leo's house, and that they're planning to kill her. I would remind you that Uncle Leo is her son, her only son. She had already been held captive for more than a month, and she explained to me in her broken English that she would die if she couldn't get away. I said, "Why are you calling me? Call 911." And she explained that she had called 911 twice already, and they just sent the killers. And if she called again, they were just going to kill her. Uncle Leo had a soundproofed, padded kill room complete with chains in the wall built into his Fairfax, Virginia home. And they kept my stepmom, most of the time, chained in that kill room. A quick aside before continuing with my story. After my stepmom was released from the trap, Uncle Leo invited me over for dinner, and I was traumatic amnesia enough to go. The next time I saw her, she was like a Holocaust victim, very skinny. She'd obviously been starved. She had the look of someone who had been abused constantly and daily. Anyway, when I went over there was no dinner, of course. Leo and his son and his wife pulled some guns on me and immediately tried to put me in that room to chain me there and torture me to death. There was a fight. I knocked Leo on the ground a couple of times. I might have kicked him. I took his Glock, then I took the knife from the 18-year-old grown son. He should be a lot stronger than me at that point. I was fairly old. Anyway, I locked both the son and Leo in the room. I might have kicked the son in the chest. Anyway, there was no way to open the soundproof door from the inside. So once they were locked in, they were trapped. So the neighbors heard the commotion next door and called the police. And so a single police officer came, and they were caught red-handed. Okay, there's a murder room with chains. I explained that my stepmother had been chained there from the neighbors, a man and a woman, respectable people making $300,000 a year. This is Fairfax, Virginia. They testified that they heard screams and moans coming from the home, coming from Uncle Leo's house. So the room was not exactly soundproof. And they saw people go in and never come out again. Okay? And they were suspicious that they were murdering people, and they told this to the police. Victor and Babyface cops showed up with their guns drawn, and Gigi too. Everybody's got guns pointed at me. I screamed, "Arrest them," to the cop. the cop instead very warmly. Long story very short. The neighbors next door, they disappeared that night and were never seen again. This is Fairfax, Virginia. Very easy to prove. Okay, they're right next door to my Uncle Leo. Do I know his address? Is it listed? Yes. Have I told this to the police? How many dozens of times have I told this to the police? That's the question. Okay, so that was a man, a woman, and 2 small children disappeared. They were murdered, of course. Okay, also the neighbors next door to my father in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Here, they disappeared. On the other side lived 2 police officers. They were a husband and a wife and a college-age son. What happened there? My father had someone in the basement. I found out about it. I grabbed a gun. There was a shootout. Okay, I was shooting at my father. My father was shooting at me. We were exchanging gunfire, and there's a man that I was trying to save. He had his eyes cut. He had Drano poured in his ears and his eyes. He had his face skinned so that the skin was in a flap around his neck. He'd been held there about 3 months. All of the bones from his kneecaps down had been broken. His hands, the small bones of his hands had been broken. The man next door saw it. He grabbed his gun and called 911. That entire family disappeared. Another entire family disappeared at my father's apartment complex before he moved to the other location in Gaithersburg, Maryland. This is location B on this map. Victor, my father, invited me over. He was attacking me in the laundry room with a gun and a knife. He was trying to kill me. He was raping me. He was beating me. He was pistol whipping me. I headbutted him. I punched him in the nose. I knocked his gun on the ground. Standard stuff. Anyway, so this man, he saw my father beating a small boy, me, and he called 911. So babyface cops showed up immediately, of course, because they took all the calls. They snatched the entire family. Okay, this man, his pregnant girlfriend, this was a man who lived with his girlfriend and 2 children. They were planning to get married. The woman was pregnant. She already had 2 small children. They stuffed all of them in the car, and they took the whole lot of them, and they murdered them. And, of course, I know where they're buried. They're buried in the largest mass burial site in these United States. And, I'm just going to give you the address to that burial site. Also, at the farm property, the 49 acres, which my father always called the 80 acres. Tell me why. He was a pathological liar. Anyway, this entire family abutting where the back entrance to the farm, they disappeared. Are there records of this? Of course. The 49-acre farm property where most of the bodies are buried is located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, on Mount Tabor Road, directly behind the Mount Tabor United Methodist Church. Uncle Leo got such a taste for raping and murdering and killing that the regular murder orgies held in West Virginia, in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, with my father and all the celebrities and stuff, they were not enough for his enormous appetites. He wanted more. He wanted his own victims. He wanted to keep his own men, women, and children in his own kill room. So he took a job delivering pizza after work, in addition to his job as an engineer. And he became the primary source of victims for both locations. I can guarantee you that Uncle Leo is still murdering today. Over the next 2 weeks, I reported that my mother was shot and held captive at Uncle Leo's house in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. Every jurisdiction. I lived in the tri-state area, so I just would drive my car to whatever jurisdiction and report it to the police. I also reported the other murders that my father was committing, the rapes and the child molesting, and the locations of the bodies, and the fact that he had attempted to murder me that night. But the cop would just hold me there. Whatever cop in any jurisdiction, they would just hold me there until the murderers appeared. Always, it was Babyface, Victor, and Gigi, and they would try to shoot me and stuff me in the car in front of the cop and then write false reports stating that I assaulted them. Again, this is the best documented crime spree in the history of well-documented crime sprees. Interestingly, I can't get any records. So therefore, I relentlessly pursued my congressman in person, by phone. I spoke extensively to his staff on the recorded line. I wrote him emails, and finally, I sent him certified mailings. Eventually, I suppose he felt that he had to act to document this, that he had taken some action on it. So a few days later, Victor showed up at my federal office building with Diana as his hostage. He yanked her around by her hair and then gripped her arm firmly with one hand and pressed his loaded gun into her stomach and face with the other hand. He forced her to open her mouth, and he put the barrel of the gun into her mouth on camera in front of multiple cops inside a federal office building. He brought Babyface Cop and Gigi with him, and a new African-American cop who I'd never seen before. This man joined them in their crimes for the next 6 months or so. It was his beat, I guess, so they needed him around to justify their behavior. Additionally, there were 2 Secret Service agents and 1 Secret Service officer. I knew the Secret Service officer from my megachurch. I knew him very well. Additionally, there were 2 uniformed armed Federal Protective Services security officers present, 1 male and 1 female. Okay, so there's 6 officers there. Everyone has a gun. Okay, so they dragged me out of my office at gunpoint. When I saw them, I locked the door, I turned out the light, and I called 911 reporting an armed assault, and I reported them all by name. They dragged me out of my office and held me at gunpoint in the hallway of my office building for about 45 minutes while they beat me, they raped me, they threatened me with guns and a razor-sharp skinning knife. Diana was dirty. She hadn't bathed recently. She was skinnier than I had ever seen her. She had dropped at least 40 pounds. She had no bra or panties on under her thin dress. It was too thin for the weather. And it was clear to me that they had just released her nude from her chains and crammed a dress over her head and brought her there. They didn't even allow her to shower. Victor, my father, he yanked her hair. He punched her in the face repeatedly until a welt appeared under her eye. He reached under her dress and raped her with his hand while he was choking her. He bit her face and her neck while he raped her. He threatened to blind her with his razor-sharp skinning knife and he pressed it repeatedly to her throat. He demanded that she recant her lies. He said, "Say you love me. Say he's lying. You know I'll kill you. You know what I do to people who cross me. Is that what you want to happen? I'll bury your ass today. Come on, we're going to bury them at the farm right now. Grab him too." He was referring to me. "I'll do it right now." All of this was done in front of the 6 cops present. The male Federal Protective Service officer had never seen anything like this. He doubled over to retch, and then he just ran away. And he said, "I'm leaving, I was never here." He was physically ill from what he was witnessing. The Secret Service officer, whom I knew well from my megachurch, he was sweating profusely, and he literally just ran away. But he wasn't allowed to leave before he agreed to provide sworn false testimony on their behalf. Victor and his crew are responsible for the murder and apparent suicide of several uniformed police officers that I'm aware of. And they literally murder anyone and or arrest them for sex crimes, anybody who opposes them. So Diana was writhing. She was tormented in a puddle in the hands of these monsters. She was just melting in a puddle, screaming and weeping and just going insane. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Help! Help! Murderers! Kidnappers! They're serial killers and rapists!" They grabbed me, they choked me, they raped me, they put the knife to my throat. Victor demanded that I recant my lies. He did to me what he was doing to my stepmother. Unlike her, I fought back. I bloodied Victor up. I knocked some people on the ground. I knocked some guns out of their hands. All of this, again, was done on camera in front of 6 cops and in an open hallway. Multiple witnesses saw it. At one point, two union officials showed up, and the police calmly coordinated their lies with them, what was going to be written on the reports. And everybody said that I was threatening them. I called 911 reporting all of this at least a dozen times that day and in subsequent days. I quit my job. Okay, and Victor and Gigi would collected me every morning at gunpoint to bring me to work every day. Victor, Gigi, the black cop, and Babyface would collect me every day, and sometimes strong cop, sometimes female cop. Diana was released from the kill room, taken back to my father's Victor's house, so she was saved as a result of this. Everyone there wrote false reports stating that I lied. They also wrote false reports stating that I assaulted each of them. Babyface cop told me personally, he got in my face, pointed a gun at me. He said he wrote a report against me saying that I resisted with violence. And he said that any officer in the future, anywhere in America, the next time I was detained for jaywalking or chewing gum or speeding, I would just be shot on sight. That's exactly what he said to me. A murder contract was placed on my head. 7 persons took this contract, 6 men and a woman. That woman is Gigi Treson. Gigi Treson has assaulted me in all 50 states with a gun using a false federal agent's badge. Gigi has also assaulted me in as many as 40 countries worldwide. Here I am in Malaysia working on a movie project highlighting private space programs, interviewing their famous astronaut, Dato Sheikh Musafar. Gigi followed me there, assaulting me in the airport on camera in front of multiple witnesses. She hired 2 assassins to murder me in 2 separate locations in Malaysia, north and south. She bribed the airport cop and assaulted me constantly under this police officer's supervision. I complained to the Malay embassy and the police relentlessly, and I sent them many certified letters. I also contacted Customs and Homeland Security. I spoke extensively to a federal agent assigned there. Finally, the Malay embassy replied after several months of back and forth. Their exact response was, "We are informed that you are a born-again Christian, a Jew, and a homosexual." You can't make this stuff up. The congressman contacted me personally by phone after the falsely documented armed assaults at my federal workplace to inform me that he was filing charges against me and that if I ever contacted him again, I would be arrested. After my father's death, my stepmother was moved back to Uncle Leo's house where she died not long after my father passed. Uncle Leo's house is the same house where she was bound in chains, raped, beaten, and starved for months on end. She told me several times that she intended to return to Poland and enjoy her retirement in her home in Warsaw that she kept during her marriage to my father. Uncle Leo, her son, constantly said, "Oh, we're figuring it out. You know, my mother's getting old. We don't want her to live on her own." But the majority of both sides of my family still live in Poland. Diana had more family in Warsaw than here. Why didn't they let her go? There is only one rule among the murderers: never let the victim escape. Diana could go to the police in Poland. She could go to Interpol. She could tell them about the murders. She could tell them about how she was shot and how she was held captive for months and starved. She could reveal the location of the largest mass grave site in the United States. They couldn't afford to take this chance. She knew too much. But there's more. I've been researching, and I found that all of my father's assets were in Diana's name. The house, the car, the guns, the many properties around Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, most of them stolen from my grandfather, who was murdered by my father. "Mr. Magellan, we found a dead body in the trunk of your car, shot by the gun on your hip, and further we found dead bodies on your property in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia." "You're mistaken, officer. This is not my car. It's my wife's car. I didn't know there was a dead body in the trunk. This is not my gun. I don't own it. I've never seen it before, and the property where you found those bodies is titled in another name." But that's not all. Okay, until her death, Diana controlled a trust worth $1 billion. That's with a B. This is stolen money. In fact, the theft of this money represents the single largest fraud in Maryland history. These murders would not have continued without this money. Every single person involved has been bribed with this money. This is the largest public bribery and corruption scandal in United States history. It's also the largest RICO in Maryland history. You can read more about this in my books, Blood Sacrifice and Serial Killer's Son, available worldwide on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle versions.